The Tao of Deep Intimacy Podcast, Episode number 3, Practices for Male Cultivation with Loren Johnson.
Hey, welcome back to the Tao of Deep Intimacy Podcast. I'm really happy today to welcome my colleague and friend, Loren Johnson, who's a kind of Mantak Chia Universal Healing Tao buddy. And what I love about Loren, of all of the senior teachers I talk to, he's also an acupuncturist, and he's like nerdy. He really knows this stuff like inside out. He knows the finest details of these practices. So you can learn a lot. Loren is actually one of the very few people in the world certified to the highest levels that Mantak Chia teaches. There's the highest level is called Sealing of the Senses, and there's only 4 people who know that, one of them being Master Chia himself. So Loren's has really explored this world like very, very rigorously. He's a licensed acupuncturist, lives in Los Angeles, and has some of Hollywood's big names as his clients. So he's a fun guy. So welcome, Loren.
Arjuna, thank you for having me and hosting this auspicious conversation, and all who are tuning in.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I know we're going to get into the weeds because you and I would get very nerdy together.
Please.
So I know that you've told me you specialize in electroacupuncture, but particularly a lot of your clients are men. So you know a lot about the male system, right? Mm-hmm. So I think let's just dive in there. And how is Taoist practice? What is the essence of how Tao? Because there are a lot of things we practice together. We practice warm-ups together. We practice breathing together. We practice 3 fires, 6 directions together, microcosmic orbit. There's a lot of things that are the same. And there's a point where it diverges, where the practices are different for men and for women. So let's start at high level. Like, what is the essence for you of mass practices that are specifically for men?
Great question to open with, and especially because we're all too busy to think nowadays quite often. And so just quintessence thing, I usually have guys sit on a tennis ball on the perineum. And by the way, none of this is medical advice. By watching and practicing, you agree, medical, psychological, or legal advice, none of it. That out of the way, sitting on the perineum, which in my opinion as a Taoist, yogi, and licensed acupuncturist is the most vital point on the body for reasons I can explain, and just grinding gently on the tennis ball, just for respect. It is a little more traditional Indian side of the Himalayas, but you still see this emphasis in the Tao, the $1 million point, Ren 1. Has so many benefits. It's no extra time. I keep one here by my desk and I just grind a few minutes a day. I don't go more than 10 minutes at once because it can be overcorrective like the long distance bicycle riders, but it's grounding. It addresses one of the number 1 causes of disease in the Tao and Chinese medicine that came from it, which is too much energy in the upper part of the body, which means overthinking, stress and out, too much emotions, all that. As we get into it, as you feel guided, we can talk about specifically the relationship practices and how that applies. But sitting on a tennis ball on your perineum is one major thing that's super easy to apply that I generally begin guys with.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, that's actually that particular practice made it into the book with your name as the source.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful practice. So you're talking about putting the tennis ball. And then when you say grinding, it just means like rotating around on it.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was working on the prostate. For those of you that are familiar with the microcosmic orbit, the 2 main meridians, that you're flooding that system, all the chakras, it's the root of your pelvic floor. I could talk this whole thing just about how beneficial that point is and how this helps.
So the perineum is, sometimes also known as the PC, and it's or the PC is it refers to, what is the full name of PC? It's the,
well, there's a lot of names, $1 million point, $10 million.
No, but when you say PC muscle, it's referring to what is it?
I think it's pubococcygeal muscle,
yeah.
But
so the perineum, for everybody listening, is basically between the scrotum and the anus, right? It's in that area, right? So are we when you're rotating on the ball, are you rotating all the way back to the beginning of the anus and all the way forward to the scrotum, or?
You can get into that. You can also even do two tennis balls, so one's getting more of the anus itself, but you're right on the perineum, you're spiraling one direction, other
Right.
direction, and then kind of ride the camel. That'll get the whole area.
Great. And I'm assuming that the main benefit of doing that is going to be to relax tension in that area. Would that be right?
Absolutely relaxing, dispersing. There's also tonifying properties. It
Yep.
does both.
Right. I'm almost feeling like I want to go grab a ball right now and
It's
roll on it
contagious.
while
I,
we're
I
talking.
I've got mine.
Got yours there. I've just got to have a tennis ball on hand at all times. Okay.
Go for it if
Um,
you want to. I'll wait for you.
Yeah, now let's zoom out for a minute. That's a great practice, and I want to get into other practices too, like why we do testicle massage and different massages for the penis and all these things. But let's just zoom out for a minute. I'd like to ask you, like, what is a little bit like not so much about technique, but once we branch, or once Taoist practices branches into masculine and feminine, what is basically the flavor of masculine practice overall? You know, what is the when a man is using practices that a woman doesn't do, what is like the overall flavor of masculine practice?
It's a very skillful question. Many of the practices, just to honor the whole kind of gender divide, I'd say most of them are actually we both do, like everyone can do. But certainly there are some specifics. For example, women can get a lot of benefit out of this, but for men,
Yeah,
prostate and all of it. So
yeah.
the flavor, well, one of the number one causes of, just to speak directly now, okay, premature, according to the Tao and Chinese medicine that came from it, premature death and premature cognitive decline has to do with men losing some of the most, if not the most, loss of energy is from unconscious sexual practice because releasing too much, just to speak directly and respectfully, it takes more energy to reproduce that particular fluid than blood. Okay. And so it's one of the most important, you see it across the stream of multiple spiritual traditions, just being mindful of that, not total withholding. We can kind of get into that if you want to, like the FOE, frequency of emission, and all that, but just better health, better cognition. As Napoleon Hill said, the transformation of mediocrity into genius with his book of Laws of Sex in 16 Lessons. One of them was on sexual energy, but he didn't tell us how to.
Napoleon Hill wrote about sex. I didn't know that.
Well, he Laws of Success in 16 lessons. One of them was about sexual energy and how it's required for the transformation of mediocrity into genius because you're constantly just losing the energy.
Yeah.
But he didn't tell us how that I've ever seen, gave us any tools. And that's where the
Okay.
Tao shines.
Right, right. So yeah, that's great. So I'm just going to repeat that back to you and ask a little clarifying question. So what I'm hearing really is the essence of masculine practice that's different from women is to do with semen retention, right? And having some choice and mastery over the frequency of ejaculation.
Yes and no. I can't exactly agree because when we say retention, it sets up tension in the mind.
Yeah, yeah,
I teach prolong versus prevent. So if you
yeah.
can last at least 20 minutes, which is the minimum in the sexual experience, solo or with a partner, it's a minimum amount of time to hit full body states. That's first of all, minimum. It's also going to give your body a chance to absorb this energy. So then if you do in fact go over the edge and there's a frequency of emission, FOE, that's kind of recommended by age and all that to not lose so much energy, if you last at least 20 minutes first, you won't get as exhausted. So I teach prolong versus prevent, but that's one major aspect, but that's actually getting into advanced stuff. I love that you just cut right to the testy massage. That was the second thing I was going to address. Whether you want to touch frequency of emission or not, squeezing your dragon pearls every day
Let's
is going to.
let's come there in a minute. Let's stay with the basic principle of masculine practice, and then before we go into more technique, if you don't mind, yeah.
I don't mind.
So yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're emphasizing, these are all very important points. We don't want to gloss over that.
Absolutely.
What I'm hearing you emphasize, it's the transmutation of the energy that's
Yes.
important, not just blocking it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we never block. And think
yeah,
about it. Most of the time we're engaging sexually, we're not trying to reproduce.
yeah,
Okay, so why not harness that most powerful energy we have? And even just in the name of better sex, forget this higher evolved, and I don't care if I die and early in my brain function. I don't care about any of that. Just better sex.
Yeah.
This is the ticket. Okay, so yes, um, being mindful of, look, sexual kung fu means skillful practice of sex, and it's one of the biggest wounds collectively in humanity. Yes, let's be skillful with sexual energy is a major tenet of the Tao, especially for men who tend to get a little wild with it, for better or for worse.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said about 20 minutes. That figure actually comes up frequently in research, okay?
Yeah.
Because you just mentioned 20 minutes as the minimum time for the energy to become full body. But there's a couple of other interesting things that I was just looking it up now to see if I could find it, but I couldn't get it quickly. There was a report that came out. I'll look back to it a little later. One of those, it was like the Masters and Johnson, but it was a similar report. Now I'll remember its name in a minute, where they did research and they said if a man can actually remain aroused and erect for 20 minutes without ejaculating, he can theoretically go on forever. It's like it's a sort of point past which if you have like mastery over the energy to 20 minutes, you can go forever. And actually, this book that I read, my first Taoist sexuality book that I got in I think it was 1970s.
Wow.
Yeah, book is by Jolan Chang. It's before Master Chia.
Yeah.
He also said he has the same statistic in there. I don't know where he got it from. That he got it from a Taoist text. That once a man cannot ejaculate for 20 minutes, after that he can choose whether he ejaculates.
Yeah, it gets a lot more in our realm of control, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, since we're on this topic, and I want to kind of concur, that I mean, you've got the mileage, as an acupuncturist, as a healer, as a longtime practitioner. All I've got is, well, it's not true. All I've got, but I've been doing a lot of research on this in order to write this book. I've read just about every contemporary book there is on sexuality, on intimate relationship. I think I've read at this point, I think 71 books written in English on Taoism.
Nice.
Yeah, like all meditations. So I've really done a lot of research. Mainly, I think it was a little bit, formula. It was motivated by insecurity. Like, who am I to write this book? So I sort of overcompensated by just reading everything. So yeah. So I wanted just to, first of all, just to concur that this is an important topic, that we're not talking about blocking. Because some books, some of the approaches, sexuality approaches, people teaching sexuality talk about like pressing the $1 million point to kind of block, like you're already at that point of coming and you just kind of, it's almost like putting a cork in the pipe. And
Yeah.
of course, what that can do is cause the semen to go backwards up into the bladder. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing. Yeah. So we're talking about transmuting rather than waiting until you're ejaculating and then blocking it. We're talking about transmuting the energy so you don't get to that point. But I'd like to put a little refinement on this together if we can get your comments, because right, looking into this, first of all, Master Chia makes the distinction according to age.
Yeah.
Right, that a young man of like in his teens or early 20s could ejaculate every few days without any negative consequence.
It's every 4 days for in their 20s.
Yeah. And then there's a chart, and the chart actually changes between different books, and different times when he's teaching. But as we progressively go on, then in your 40s, what would it be in your 40s?
Well, it doubles in 20s, 4 days, 30s, 8 days, 40s, 16 days,
Yeah.
50s, 21 days. I don't know why it doubles. Then 60s and beyond once a month, but that's actually, and then also just to men are probably already getting scared. The Tao in general condones twice a month, because even if you look up online, Western medicine confirms full spermatogenesis takes 2 months. 2 months. So that's my frequency. Now it takes years to work up to that without getting blue and on, but
Oh yeah.
generally twice a month the Tao
Yeah.
condones.
I'm actually the same. I do 60 days. Yeah.
Prospect.
I actually have it on my phone. I
Yeah,
check
yeah.
off how many days, and then yeah. But that's one thing that it gets emphasized is the frequency of ejaculation relative to age. But I want to run some other factors by you because you know this field so well. I'd
Please.
like to get your thoughts on it. So another factor that I'm aware of that doesn't get mentioned so much is the season, right? So it seems like those statistics or those figures about frequency are going to be very different in the spring than in the middle of winter, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So let's just jam on that for a minute. Those figures might go to like way more frequent when it's springtime, and perhaps no ejaculation at all during the winter months. You want to think about that one?
Yeah, for sure. That's right in the text. You're right. It's not quite as emphasized. Bottom line, if it's cold out, um, your body, the male body's losing the yang when
Yeah.
we release. So we minimize it. And if it's dead of cold, yeah, don't do it. Whereas in the spring, we have the maximum freedom. Also, there's others. If you're sick, you don't want
Yes.
to because you're
Right.
losing a lot of your zinc
Right.
and
Exactly. So that's the third factor is when you're sick or very run down,
yep,
then ejaculating is going to be much harder on your system.
that's right.
If you're on vacation, in the Caribbean and sleeping a lot and eating a lot of great food, you might be able to ejaculate much more frequently and not notice any.
Well, and let me give everyone a hack here that I thought was invaluable. The only thing they said in Chinese medicine school about this was, how'd you feel the day after? So
Yeah.
if you felt tired, you did it too frequently. If you were okay, so that's to your point. That's why I say prolong versus prevent. Go 20 minutes and then do what your body does naturally. And how did you feel the day after? And you get into your own, not because me or Tao or anything said, this is what your body communicates.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's a fourth factor I'd like to run by you as well, because I've been teaching this a lot with I work with couples. So and when I work with couples, I do one-on-one with the men to talk about sexual practice. So I get a lot of data. So the other thing I've noticed about this in terms of the depletion, not only the depletion like how you feel the next day, but also like the actual experience of ejaculating at the time. One thing that I've never heard emphasized in Taoism, maybe because it wasn't even relevant, is the context in which you ejaculate. So let me run some possibilities by you, and it seems to me that these different contexts have a significant impact on the energy depletion. So at one end of the spectrum would be masturbating alone to porn, right? So looking at pornographic images, masturbating with your hand, right? So that, there's how do you feel after that, right? Then there might be, like something more like a ritual, alone, but you're touching your whole body, taking your time, Then there would be ejaculating with somebody, right? But maybe it doesn't last so long, But then at the far end would be prolonged lovemaking with your partner and then timing it so you come together.
Mhm.
Now, what I've observed is if you can do that, which takes some dual cultivation, when a man and a woman peak together, the depleting effect is dramatically different than for example, with masturbation. What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. No question, because we share her
Mhm.
excess yin, the extra, yang, the male. Yeah, that's the highest level that and even with with respect to everyone listening with the gender thing, I've seen that level of just say the highest levels of dual cultivation, regardless of gender. I've seen that higher echelon of experience.
Yeah,
That's when it's possible. But even with ourselves, a lot of the Tao practice is solo because it's so much harder with a partner to hold that edge. So we do a
yeah.
lot of solo practice, especially in so to speak training.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important when we talk about these things, this is fine edge because there's so much shame which we all carry
Yeah,
in our sexuality because of the influence of, monotheistic religion on
yeah.
on on sex. that, we've created this image of this kind of angry old man in the sky looking down on you and telling you things are wrong. So, so I think it's really important to be able to unravel this, that we definitely want to be able to enjoy and celebrate whatever our experience is without shame. And at the same time, be able to make choices that feel good. So my intention in working with people is not to shame anybody, but to offer them gateways into truly fulfilling experience.
Well, to that, and you used the word shame a few times, I just have to mention very brief one-off. My original awakening before I turned to the Tao and mastered Shia was my original tantric teacher from India. He was a Sanskrit scholar from Bengal, and he said, "Okay, I'll teach you tantra if you remember this mantra, which just means mind act. I am fearless, I am shameless, I am doubtless." Because the negative emotion in the kidneys, which largely governs sexual energy with other organs, yes, but the water element, right now, fear is fear. But in the past, it's shame. And in the future, it's doubt. And it's all contraction. It all shuts down our sexual energy, our creative and cognitive, because the kidneys govern the brain in Chinese medicine. So I don't sit here like Om Shanti, I'm fearless, shameless, doubtless. But look, the Tao promises better sex than we or our ancestors ever tasted. And I've seen it over and over. And most people get a shame attack. They like, what? Like you said, that man shaking the finger, that's so deep in the bloodline, ancestral line. I'm fearless, I'm shameless, I am doubtless. Eradicating fear across all time zones is a very powerful mantra, mind act to navigate this space.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. That's great.
And one other just super brief thing too. The Tao formally integrated Buddhist philosophy and science, distinct from the religion. And if you look at the third sila of Buddhism as defined by the tantric Buddhists who have penetrated sexual energy and understand it versus the celibate ones that they just shame and whatever, we don't talk about it. They'll tell you sexual misconduct means adultery. Respectfully, that's not what it is. It's wrong partner, wrong place, wrong time, wrong method. That. And so even the porn thing, if that's your jam, okay, make it, like you said, a ritual. You're doing your practice. I'm fearless, shameless, doubtless. It's like one of the main tenets of Buddhism and even Stoicism is, again, science, philosophy. It's not what's happening that causes suffering. It's our thoughts and judgments about what's happening. So if I'm on the porn and I'm doing, oh, shame. Look, I'm fearless, shameless, doubtless. So those two little sound bites are huge in this whole sphere. Fearless, shameless, doubtless, and wrong partner, wrong place, wrong time, wrong method. Third sila of Buddhism, sexual misconduct.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, so this is we could really just spend the rest of our time talking about these things because there's so much as we've lifted the repressive kind of wet blanket that was shrouding sexuality. We've opened up so many possibilities, and that gives the freedom to explore anything. So, like you said, whatever's your jam. But on the other hand, when you have so much more freedom to explore everything, it's then very important to get fine-tuned to what is it you really want and what really fulfills you.
Yeah.
So I think, you mentioned, for example, porn. Well, on the one hand, I totally resonate with what you say. Like, if that's your jam, enjoy it, and at the same time, there's a massive amount of really interesting research emerged on the effect of looking at porn on the vagus nerve, right? That which we don't need to go into all of it now, but like, because I think honestly, probably the majority, I mean, more than 50% of the men who I've worked with have had some kind of, you could say porn addiction, meaning they're using porn more than they actually feel is really healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And it is an addictive thing. And actually, the way that I really helped people to make fresh choices was to become aware of this research, of what pornography does to the vagus nerve and the connection between the genitals and the heart and the genitals and other parts of the body. Anyway, that's a whole other topic.
No, but just very briefly on that, and I agree with everything you just said. It reminds me of the smoking meditation by Osho. You tell someone to stop smoking, like the data on smoking is like just a no-brainer. People still do it, okay? Take it out slowly. Feel it, mindful, everything mindful. How does your body feel? So when you bring that light, you meet them where they are. Because as far as I am aware, and I know you have a lot of stats on this, the majority of internet traffic in the neighborhood anyway, of all internet traffic is still porn. So
Yeah.
if we can give those guys stop porn, what do you mean? Okay, do your practice with it. Organically, they're going to build up their level of consciousness where maybe their own visual of whatever the whole practice will naturally, you know what I'm saying? So we can meet
Yeah.
people where they are.
Yeah. The statistic actually that I have seen is not so much to do with traffic, but money exchanged, right?
Ah,
So I don't believe that it's the majority of traffic, but in terms of money transacted over the internet, more than 50% is connected with sex.
well, that's a huge, either way, let's split hairs
Yeah.
on that. It's a big,
Yeah.
most
It's
guys, I mean,
huge.
I know
Yeah.
guys in Hollywood that have the most beautiful partners you can possibly imagine. They got the money, the cars, blinging. They are with their partner. They have to sit there and watch porn while they're
Yeah.
doing it. So
Yeah.
I'm with you completely that it's,
Yeah.
so to speak, a problem, but this practice helps us skillfully,
Yeah.
so, address.
Well, I think, coming back to why we practice, what is the overarching why of all these practices? You mentioned transmuting energy, but, and that's all part of like being able to choose, to have true, almost like going back to the beginning and being able to choose fresh, like what kind of sexual experience do you want to have? What kind of intimate relational experience do you want to have? And with no limits, you can have whatever you want. And given, if you practice and given that kind of fresh choice, we're able to see where we've been compromising and where we would actually like something more nourishing. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's just stay with that for a second longer because it's so important. Like there are, as you know, there are lots. Mantak Chia has written several books which outline all these practices, and the most common thing I hear when because I teach this stuff, the most common thing I hear from people who come to classes is people say, "Oh yeah, I bought the books, but I never did the practice." Right?
Yeah.
In other words, so the information about how to do all this is fairly available.
Yes.
People don't do it, and I think the way that I can explain that to myself when I see how many people have access to this information but don't do it is there's not a clear enough why. That's why I want to linger a little bit in the overall like context of why we have masculine practice, because unless you feel really motivated, who's going to remember to do all these things? Who's going to remember to do massage this and stretch this and breathe in this way? It's like you've got to have a reason to do it, because if it's just like, oh, it's cool, it's a good thing to do, that won't last very long.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about transmuting the energy, so that the semen is not lost easily. Let's just jam a little bit more about, what is the long-term consequence once you get into retaining semen and moving that energy up into the rest of the body, and maybe you're going a couple of months between episodes of ejaculation. What can we notice for you and your clients and me and my clients? What can we notice as the benefit of that? What it does for you?
I really appreciate you coming back to the why, because that's the part of the brain that deals with decision making. And without that, nothing happens. So here's some low hanging fruit. The best sex you or your partner ever had. Okay. Dealing with one of the number, if not the number one causes of disease, of premature aging, of premature cognitive decline. Okay. All of that. It's just we all have to deal with sexual energy. It's one of the big, I would argue it's probably the biggest collective wound in humanity is around this. And I actually have some very interesting stories if you want to get. My yoga teacher was hardcore secret society members. They had their own private army, blood in, blood out kind of stuff. And he totally left that whole world to become an awakened master. But what he told me about how the secret society's role, where a lot of the Europeans learn their stuff, because think about how old India is, during the East India days, they purposefully peed in the punch. This is his language of our understanding of sexual energy because it's the foundation of our house. And you can always get shamed out of your power. And I've seen it over and over where men, okay, the best sex you or your ancestors ever had. Like, do you hear those words? We're not kidding. And oh, I have shame attack. Shame attack. Where's that coming from? You didn't violate, wrong partner, wrong place, wrong time, wrong method. You have that as your navigational impetus. So where's the shame coming from? So there's, roughly half of our people gravitate in their psychological motivation to moving towards pleasure. Best sex you or your ancestors ever had. Roughly half of people in their psychological orientation move away from pain. One of the number one reasons we're predeceasing and have cognitive decline before women. Either way, this practice is where it's at.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm just, this is obviously we're getting into some really big topics here. It's also interesting. It's interesting to track the relationship, the collective relationship to sexuality and the way that the stages we went through in organizing society, So basically, that's a whole thing, but actually when we moved from like being nomadic, at our prehistoric, which is a long, long time, probably 255,000 out of 260,000 million years, 260,000 years, sorry. Majority of that time we were nomadic. And there's a lot of evidence that there was fairly widespread use of psychedelics
Yes.
across all parts of the world, right? So mushrooms show up everywhere. And you can see it from anthropological evidence, but also contact with tribes who haven't been contacted before, very different attitudes towards sexuality. So from being nomadic, like forever, we started to congregate in villages, which was the beginning of agriculture, people gathering together, putting walls around, now tying up animals and being able to milk them and everything. Even during that period, there was really, we don't see evidence of, if you look at anthropological evidence and we don't see evidence of a shift, right? But then about 2,500 years ago, we began to see the emergence of the city state, right? Which was like where you had a ruler with a large number of these villages under their rule. And there were a few things now necessary. First of all, that ruler needed men to fight their wars. So they needed men to go off and risk their life, right? Number two, they needed everybody to be willing to work for little or no money and for the ruler to get everything. Now, this is a kind of absurd suggestion, really. It's like, hey, I'm the ruler. I want you guys to like risk your lives, even though you've got a nice village and family, and I want you to work for free like all your waking hours and give all the fruits to me. Now, the average person is going to go, why should I do that, right? So it was around that time, 2,600 years ago, that we invented the notion of monotheism. And we'd never done that before. Now we had one creator God, right, who has commandments. This is not just in Judaism and Christianity. It's like all around that time. And now what happened? Psychedelics for the first time are not okay anymore. Right?
Yeah.
They were being used in Elysius, but suddenly not okay, right? Sex has now become a problem, right?
Yes.
Right. But also anger, which is a natural energy of reasserting of freedom, became problematic, So you see all of this emerging at the same time, monotheism and this problematic relationship to sexuality. So that's a whole kind of validation of what you're saying.
That's very solid scholarship, and thank you for and I first of all would argue we're still on that method. I think we'll see about that, but we're basically, debt slaves. But again, the why, okay, the sexual magnetism, I think this touches on where Napoleon Hill was going with the transformation of mediocrity into genius. Whatever you want to create in your life, it's going to require that magnetic power. And because when you get into Chinese medicine, the kidneys govern willpower, and you're wasting all that energy. You just don't have the mojo. Whereas someone walks in a room and they're like, what is that? Not to egoic level, but I was a Gap model. I did a few campaigns for them, and I took all the money I made and put it into Learn Wellness. Most of the people on set, and there's some famous people I could name that you would know, frankly and respectfully, weren't that talented. But what they were was dripping with libido. They were just like, what? You just paid attention to them. So no matter
Yeah.
what you're doing in your life, most of us could use more
Yeah.
willpower and magnetism. And so again, the why.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So let me just summarize that because we've been meandering a bit, but it's really good. So the why of these practices is prolong arousal without losing semen so that energy can transmute into the rest of the body, which will give you longer life and better health, clearer cognition,
Yep.
and more mojo, more generative energy with which
Yep.
to move through life. That's a good
And
summary.
all of that and more pleasure. And look, sexual energy has two primary characteristics. Above all, it amplifies. So it's
Yeah,
just and I think that's one of the reasons they demonized it. They need weak people, just
yeah,
whatever,
yeah, yeah,
amplifies.
yeah. Brilliant. Well, let's move on just into some more practices. We talked about rolling on the tennis ball, and you started to talk about testicle massage. So let's,
Yes.
yeah,
Dragon pearls, Tao poetic code for the testicles. We want to squeeze a number of times equal to our age at least. I do 108. Thank you. I know I look young for my age every day.
I know no one believes me that you're 92. I mean, it's
Thank you.
just,
Thank you. Hey, I
yeah,
owe everything to the practice.
yeah,
And so this is an interesting anecdote, but I had a gentleman that I told this to, squeeze the boys every day. He comes back. I didn't tell him this. I'm not telling anyone this. He told me organically, hey, I got off my thyroid meds. And I'm like, and I started dissecting that. The whole endocrine system that the gonads and of course the prostate are the root glands of is interconnected. So you affect one, you affect them all. Who doesn't have emotional volatility nowadays, right? And the obesity and all the hormonal and whatever, it's such an easy way to interface with your consciousness. You want to feel just strong and rooted and squeeze your boys. I go in the stall when I tinkle, in public and, shake it off and I give him a shake and it's like I feel strong again. It's such an easy way to interface with our energy, emotions and all of it. So squeezing the boys every day. And we're talking no extra time. So far you're laying in bed before you get out of bed, squeeze your boys. You're going to sit at the desk anyway, we haven't gotten into anything that's going to take away from you whatever you're
yeah.
doing.
Well, let's just take a little footnote on that one for a minute because we're both of us teaching. You're working as an acupuncturist, and I'm working with couples to help people restore some sense of delight and sacredness and nourishment from their relationship, right? And I hear this a lot in the field of conscious relationship and in the field of cultivating sexuality. I hear so much people wanting to reassure their audience that this is not going to take time and it's going to be really quick. And I actually want to just question that a little bit. Like, why do we want to cater to people's, to this kind of collective decision that we don't have enough time? Because in my experience, a lot of things in life are only a lot of things in life only reveal their inner beauty when we give them enough time. So supposing you have a newborn baby, right? Supposing a mother, has a newborn baby. Are we going to have a conversation about how can she nurse the baby and look after the baby in minimum time, right? It's like, that would not occur to you. It's like, or you have a family. Now you've got children. How can I navigate my life to give minimum time to this role of parenting? Like, that would not give you the most value, right? But equally, now just to pivot that around, I think there's a lot of things like that, that where the activity or the aspect of that of your life, it only actually opens its fruits when you give it enough time. So equally, supposing we took the attitude to sex, like, sex is great. Let me show you how you condense it down to the minimum amount of time. That would not give you the best sex. We want to do the opposite. How can we actually elongate it? Now, when it comes to practices, I think it's really interesting because I noticed this also in conscious relationship. John Gottman and Eli Finkel, who are both like, forerunners in this world, they're trying to, I see them trying to convince their audience, here's how you can practice conscious relationship and it's going to take you just a very little time. It's like, why? Why not give it more time? So, and I'm saying this because I've noticed with my own practice of Qigong, it actually needs time. Like I spend an hour and 15 minutes a day practicing, and I wouldn't want to try and do it in less. So just let's just reflect on that a minute about.
I agree completely. I've done yoga every day since the day I started, since 1997. And with respect to what you just said, that very few hold it, I practice more every day. Doesn't mean I'm better. I owe everything to the Tao. But I'm reminded of the quote by Hippocrates, father of Western medicine. People want to heal until discipline is involved. I thought the phenomena you're skillfully articulating about what the heck, why can't you, was modern. Get up, do 10, 5, 10 minutes a day. I don't have time, whatever. It's an old thing and it's even worse now. And even with the paradigm of debt slavery and all that, we are so beholden to this thing called money, which is frankly unnatural and under its current construct is currently collapsing.
Mm,
Okay. I agree. And so, but you have to meet, we don't have to do anything. If you want results, having taught for decades, you have to meet people where they are. And my father, my stepfather to be exact, we had some tension competing for my mother's attention, but he did give me one very important piece of wisdom. Degrees of change. You're a ship at sea, 1 degree of change. You don't notice anything few days, but after a while, you're an ocean apart from where you would have been. And when
mm,
I teach people, if I tell them a whole day do this, they do nothing. If I give them one thing to do and they feel a little benefit, maybe two, maybe three, maybe four. So I'm just meeting people where they are. But I
yeah.
agree completely. What the hell is wrong with people? Priorities.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So anyway, testicle massage, it's good. So there are quite a number of different methods taught for testicle massage. Let's just see if we can condense it down to the most useful one that's really clear to people.
Squeeze your boys every day, number of times equal to your age.
Can you what exactly does squeeze mean though?
Squeeze your boys every day. Just give
Okay.
them, if you want the full thing, squeeze, tap, and shake. Obviously, you're not hurting yourself, but you're juicing your glands. And I don't mean to be gauche or anything, but just the reality. Again, why? A lot of guys, oh, evolution, I don't care. Okay, I got an inch longer in my lingam in less than 6 months of stretching it out every day. That's another fundamental of sharpening the knife that we can address if you want. And my dragon pearls got bigger and they're stronger because in my martial applications, this is part of this comes from the iron crotch, where they went crazy. They'd kick each other and over and over. I'm not saying that, but squeezing them, they've gotten bigger and more resistant to striking.
Yeah,
So you get stronger, it desensitizes it so you can last longer, on and on. So just give them a nice, gentle, but intentional squeeze, do 100 times, whatever you got time for, at least your age.
brilliant. Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. I think we should perhaps just put a footnote in for people interested that if you go into these different Taoist texts, including Mantak Chia's books, there are like multiple variations on testicle massage. So people who are interested can go and
Oh, yeah, spiral, there's
yeah,
layers. And
yeah,
Master Chia's book, Sexual Reflexology. But
yeah.
again, one, two, three, too many. If you just start squeezing them, they're going to get, like, some of the benefit.
Great. Well, let's move on to another. You just touched on another practice for men, which is penis massage. So let's talk about that now.
Yes, sir. Okay, so now we're getting into some more advanced, simple, but still advanced. I referenced it a moment ago. This is how I got over an inch longer in my, respectfully, everyone, erect jade stock, as it's called in the Tao, lingam in Tantra, in less than 6 months doing this. Whenever we pull on the dragon, on the lingam, or the whole package, which is the advanced hanging of the weight that we may or may not get to today, you want to make sure that you engage your pelvic floor by engaging the perineum and the anus, or at least the anus if you can't isolate the perineum yet, because it's going to seal your pelvic floor. So then as you pull down, you're not going to get prolapse. Now, at the levels of weight that we practice and recommend around 10 pounds, that probably wouldn't happen. But if you look online, there's masters in Palm Springs where I lived for a while of a guy pulling a plane. He wrapped, and first of all, that can be fatal.
Hmm.
You can get a blood clot. And if you're not doing it right with a lot of core power, Bruce Lee level, you can get prolapse. Okay. So we pull up gently on the anus and the perineum, we pull down gently. And then for the sharpening the blade, sharpening the knife, you imagine milking a cow. You kind of
Yeah,
pull it out and then you just hold it and do it 3, 6, or 9 times. I do it in the shower with soap as lubrication. Takes very little time and it has a multitude of benefit.
brilliant. So you're saying you just do like 9 milkings a day and that's it.
I only three basic, 3, 6, 9. You got time and feeling saucy, go for 9. So yeah, 3, 6, 9 or beyond. When you see Master Chia he went on Brian Rose, do 300 a day. And it's like, great. When I'm a Taoist in retirement, I may, but at least the essence, you take those zeros off, you got three, you're going to start getting the ball moving.
Great. Now, um, by the way, for anybody listening, I'll just give these guys a shout out. There's a website called Tao Traditions, TAO Traditions, and if you're interested in penis massage, they actually have these products. They have a particular oil. They have some herbs you take, and they've got a wonderful little book that you download. You just click on downloads on their site, and it says DK oil instructions. It's got 8 different methods for massaging the penis there, which you do with their oil and their herbs. And yeah, so as you mentioned, greater length, greater girth, the correction of Peyronie's disease, curves, all of these things are because, of course, there's no bones in there. So it's all to do with just sacs of blood, pretty easy to correct. Yeah.
Well, and also as a why, most men, and I've seen this specializing in men for decades, their dragon seemingly disappears, especially if we start aggregating weight, which roughly 80% of adults are overweight. So it's the root in the Tao of our tendon system. The lingam, like the tongue, is like half muscle, half tendon. So as we get tendon tension, it can shrink. As we get that big belly, it can shrink. So it's also going to keep the size optimal.
Yeah.
It's gonna desensitize it a little bit so you can actually last longer, better pleasure, health, all we're talking about. There's so many benefits.
Brilliant. Let's move on from there. Let's talk a little bit about breathing for men, like
Yes.
particularly testicle breathing.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, I think this is really wise to address because my original awakening was Kundalini, and then I got into the Tao, which I would define as grounded Kundalini. Um, Very similar, but in a grounded framing. And so tightening the perineum, which, as I've mentioned earlier, the most vital acupoint, turns on the Kundalini and the Chi and a lot of other benefit, pelvic strengthening. When on the inhalation, when we inhale and tighten the perineum, which is generally how it's taught across the spectrum of yoga, can really activate and exacerbate what's called Kundalini syndrome, putting people in a very fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system. The first sign you're overheating with these advanced practices, which remember, we're guarded under penalty of death forever for good reason. Pressure and heat in the head and the heart. You're overheating, okay? And so I teach testicle massage and the advanced sexual practices primarily. We can do perineum power on the inhale when we learn the grounding, how to do it gently, basically. I teach it on the exhale. Okay, so with that little disclaimer, this simple. Inhale, belly expands. Exhale, engage your perineum.
Great. You want to is that enough you want to say on that?
Well, I mean, there's more, of course. So Qigong, language of energy, is one of its definitions, is a spiral because everything in the known universe is spiraling. It's called angular momentum in physics. And so we talk about one of the oldest known diagrams in the Tao is the Tang Dynasty water wheel chart. You see the testicles, these little water wheels. So you inhale into your dragon pearls or tiger's pearls for the feminine, belly expands, and as you exhale perineum power, you feel them spiraling like water wheels. Now, I know that feels a little heady or whatever, but once you start playing with a spiral, wherever you spiral gets the chi. Wherever you focus gets the chi. Wherever you breathe gets the chi. That's energy activation triple threat. So what do they feel like? Your dragon pearls. There's your focus, there's your chi. You breathe into your dragon pearls. There's the chi. And as you exhale perineum power, you're feeling them spinning. Wherever you spin gets the chi. And that little triple threat I use to navigate all the higher practice, and we breathe it into the organs and the spine and the bam. But yeah, if you feel them spinning, even physically taking your hand and like, okay, I feel that. We do that in Qigong. You do spiral motion. Now just feel it in your orbit, in your organs. Wherever you spin gets the chi. So you can play with that, but the quintessence, inhale, belly expands, exhale, perineum power.
Brilliant. I know we're kind of we've been going for a little while, so let's just I'm going to put a little question here. We're going to edit this out. Did you say 11:40 or 11:50?
50.
Okay, perfect. Okay, edit back in. Yeah, let's touch a little bit on the practices that start to move that we can use cool and hot and in a partnership to move energy. So there's Master Chia teaches the cool draw, which is also testicle breathing, and then the big draw, and then we can start to bring that into working with a partner. Do you want to just like reflect on those a little bit?
For sure. Now we're getting into the advanced practice, the orgasmic upward draw, practice, the cool draw, which is basically the unaroused version, and where we actually bring the energy up into the spine primarily. You can bring it into the organs and different centers, which is really advanced stuff. It really is. You got to have the orbit open and boom. So generally, the way I initially teach to give something people can use right away is I always do testicle breathing. Inhale, belly expands, exhale, perineum power. Okay. And then when you get close to the edge, inhale, belly expands. The longest exhale you can make with perineum power, because as you lengthen the exhale, you enter a parasympathetic state. And then take a half breath and hold and tighten your perineum. If you can get that flow, you're going to start to that the energy will start to move. And yes, we're going to short sip it up the spine. We're going to do all kinds of play. But if you can't get kind of stand before you fly, as Mr. Miyagi said, so I usually start people with that.
Great. I feel like you've just given us a really nice little entryway. I want to invite you to just unpack it a little more.
Oh, go for it, sure. So, part of where I'm coming from, as I referenced earlier in this call, is one of the number one causes of disease in the Tao in Chinese medicine is too much energy in the upper part of the body. We're overthinking, we're stressed, and so we are going to water up, fire down. I probably should have started with is one of the great principles of enlightened immortality across the spectrum of different traditions. Water up, your sexual energy, raise up, fire down, empty your heart, mind down. So we're going to, yes, teach you how to raise that sexual energy up through your system, hit full body states and all that. But if you are not already proficient at some of the basics, like the microcosmic orbit and the grounding, the energy can get stuck up there and you get what's called Kundalini syndrome, which is a real thing. You're like, just can't go to sleep, can't close your eyes, you're overactivated. And then if we're not balanced emotionally, the primary characteristic of sexual energy of amplification can amplify stress. So I usually teach men to just do the draw to their belly. You're just doing inhale, belly expands, exhale, perineum power. You're feeling the sexual energy. You're breathing the light of your pleasure because it does help. Some people, I should mention too, it's just visualizing. Look, we live in the left brain of concepts. You have to survive. But you want to access the higher field we're discussing, you got to go into your right brain, which is feeling and sensation, visuals. So you breathe the light of your pleasure. Lingam means wand of light. You breathe the light of your pleasure, dragon pearls, belly expands. You exhale, perineum power, they spin. And then Dantian means cauldron. I got this big, big, big Japanese hand hammered bowl here. You visualize the cauldron of your pelvic floor is this cauldron. You just breathe the sexual energy up. You just feel it. The water wheels are spinning, you're breathing, and then you get close to the edge. Deep breath, long sigh, perineum power. So you're parasympathetic and grounded as possible. And you take roughly a half breath and hold. And it's going to condense the chi in your core. And the reason, just a quick addendum on that, why I'm emphasizing half breath and hold. Okay, when we hold the breath in, you have 4 stages of the breath, like the 4 seasons. Inhalation is spring, energy rising. Holding the breath in is like summer, max yang. Yesterday was the solstice, happy solstice. Exhaling is like the fall, energy falling, and holding the breath out is max yin, like winter. So yeah, we're going to hold the breath with gentle perineum power. It's going to amplify our pleasure. But if you're not grounded and boom, you can overdo it. So if you take 100% lung volume, hold your breath, perineum power, and people need to know this, it happened to me, you can faint, you can pass out. I did this in the middle of a restaurant and I fell and hit my head on the floor and blood, and I had my head stapled and the whole thing. And so you got to really approach these practices mindfully. One last time. Inhale, belly expands, long sigh with perineum power. You're parasympathetic and grounded. I feel my feet. Inhale a half breath and hold with perineum power. And that's going to be enough to start to get that energy moving. And then you just relax the breath and equalize. If you can get that flow, you can start to hit full body states. And then sure, let's go up the spine, but boom, the whole thing is that you said it. It's in the books. It's all there. But these little sound bites of how to access that safely, that's where I've, kind of specialized, frankly.
Yeah. Let's just zero in on one thing you mentioned. You talked about you talked about this being an advanced practice and then you referenced if the channel is open, right? So let's discuss a little bit like like one of our colleagues, Walter Kellenberger, who's probably been in this as long as you have, or
Longer.
longer, yeah. He's he talks about the microcosmic orbit. He said the channel is already there, but until you practice, it's like a tiny little hiking path.
Right.
And but the sexual energy is like a juggernaut. So you've got to actually turn that little hiking path into a freeway that the juggernaut can drive, because sexual energy is huge, you know. So it is a matter of like opening and clearing all these points. So I mean, let's talk about a little bit about the most effective ways to open the both the front the governor and the functional channel, the front
For
and back
sure.
channel.
And I think it may serve this conversation to mention briefly, as far as I know from the scholarship, and there are scholars who will disagree, as I see it, out of sexual hang-uppery, because the scholarship is solid, that the microcosmic orbit originally was a sexual practice. Okay, be that as it may or not, whatever, it's still the same. You're using it to full body state. So there's a lot of ways to open. I'm going to stand up and I didn't think you were going to see my pants. Pardon me. I'm wearing tie pants here. It's hard to get non-polyester clothing, which you definitely don't want to have down here. But I learned this from Master Chia.
Yeah, yeah.
Turning the water wheels. If you
Turning the
can just
water wheel. Yeah.
undulate your sacrum as you tuck it in, it activates the sacral pump, and it's going to start to pump this energy up your spine. Okay. And so you feel your dragon pearls spinning like water wheels. Okay, I feel it. And then you just wrap the chi around all the points up your spine: sacrum, T11, C7, jade pillow, crown. You just get lost in the movement. Your inhale, belly expands. Exhale, perineum power. Dragon pearls are spinning. Qigong language of energy of a spiral. You wrap it around. Your stations up the spine. Then you do the whole orbit. That movement right there, just this movement, getting lost, and bam, you will start to feel it. And then you sit down, touch your tongue to your roof of your mouth, and you just breathe it. Inhale up the spine, exhale down the front. One revolution of the orbit happens annually, according to the Tao, in all known living things. So you run your orbit 9 times, that's 9 years of chi pressure. There's a reason the Taoists are very well known for longevity.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, it's time to bring our plane into land. Thanks for that. Is there anything about practice? This conversation has been all about practices specifically for people with penises, for men. Is there anything that we didn't touch on today that was an omission?
So much. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg. Um, so,
Well, let's
one
say
thing,
specifically, is there anything that was a serious omission? Like what
yeah,
was, yeah,
I kind of touched on it. Again, one of the number one causes of disease, too much energy, upper part of the body, and how this corresponds specifically to our sexual energy. Okay. So, what I was going to show was the star of the 5 elements, and I'm going to talk about the control cycle for just a moment. The brain eats 20% of the body's energy as an organ, backed up by Western science. We can look it up at idle. You're not even thinking about anything. Okay. And so when you look at the control cycle, water extinguishes fire, fire melts metal, metal chops wood, wood breaks through the earth. Well, earth dams, or I prefer holds water. And the earth element is basically our thinking. It's the food we eat physically, but also the food of our thoughts. And most people just cannot turn off their thoughts. People forget that erection is a parasympathetic process. And so when we get into the mode and you're just thinking, I mean, I've seen this with young, vital, testosterone high men where they have like one experience where they can't get it up or whatever because they were up too late or they were tired or whatever. And then they get in their head, oh, I'm an ED now or whatever. That's going to make it worse. The simple point I'm making is the overthinking is one of the number one causes of disease, period. And it specifically messes with our access to sexual energy. And so probably the most famous meditation there is, listen to the sound of your breath, get out of that monkey mind, run the chi through the orbit. And so just be mindful that being able to put your focus where you want it, chi follows focus, has a lot of implications.
beautiful. And I think you already emphasized just a few minutes ago that one of the keys to activating more parasympathetic activity is to emphasize the out breath.
Yes, we're so many. Thanks for saying that. At the deep breathers, they focus on the inhale. That's sympathetic nervous system activating. So if you can, I like to inhale 4 and like double your exhale. If you can get in that undulation, parasympathetic, your creativity's there, and bam, and it's like, yeah, lengthen the exhale.
It's actually one of my kind of relationship teachers, Gay Hendricks. He teaches breath work. he has one particular form of breathing where you basically, the only energy you put into the breath is on the out breath. So you fully exhale and you just let the body inhale as a reflex, you know.
Right.
So you just focus on pushing all the air out. Let the autonomic nervous system do the rest.
Well, this could be an amazing, just little one-off. These two words, if you just get this from our whole chat, which I'm grateful you granting occasion for and all tuning in. Exhalation, subjugation. Lengthen the exhalation, you enter a parasympathetic state. But as you hold the breath out, the subjugation, you upregulate your
Yeah.
oxygen exchange. That's the Butenko breathing, went deep into that. So exhalation, subjugation. Lengthen your exhale, hold the breath out for a comfortable pause, which most people are very uncomfortable with that because the carbon dioxide builds in the blood, which is what's driving the extra oxygen in, increasing your oxygen exchange. Oh, I got to breathe. I got to breathe. So much of it is mental. You get comfortable with that. Exhalation, subjugation.
Beautiful. Well, we should wind up to honor your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this today. It's awesome.
Hey, you too, man. You're doing amazing work. Really appreciate the opportunity to be part of it. Thanks for all who are tuning in. Deep respect.
Thank you so much. Thank you.